The night sky above the Valoran capital shimmered like a sea of silver fire. The palace stood tall in the center of the city, made of glass and blue stone that glowed under the twin moons. Inside, laughter echoed through the grand banquet hall. Long tables overflowed with food, music filled the air, and nobles dressed in gold and crystal danced under floating lights. But outside, beyond the marble doors, sat one lonely figure. A young woman with pale violet skin, dark hair, and tired golden eyes. Her name was Lira. She sat at a small table placed near the outer gate, where the cold wind bit through her thin robe. Her plate was already cold, and her hands trembled as she tried to eat quietly, pretending not to hear the mocking voices that came from inside. She wasn't allowed in, not tonight, not ever. Lira was different, half Valoran, half human. Her mother had been Valoran, her father a human soldier who once helped their world during a war. But after the peace came, the nobles declared her family impure. They said her blood was dirty. So tonight, as the High Minister celebrated a century of Valoran unity, Lira was told to sit outside, for the comfort of the guests. She had obeyed. She always did. But each laugh from the hall stabbed her like a blade. A servant passed by and threw a small towel over her food. "Keep it covered," he said coldly. "Your kind attracts flies." Lira lowered her eyes. "Yes, sir." The servant walked away without another word. From the glowing doorway, she could see the nobles raising glasses, cheering the name of High Minister Zorath, their proud and arrogant leader. His silver horns shone under the lights. He lifted his goblet and said loudly, "Tonight we celebrate the purity of Valoran blood. Our ancestors kept our race strong, untouched by outsiders." The crowd roared, "To purity!" Lira's hands shook. She bit her lip until it bled, whispering to herself, "Don't cry. Don't let them see you cry." But the tears still came. Quietly. She didn't wipe them. The cold rain that began to fall would hide them well enough. Then something strange happened. The laughter inside the hall suddenly faded. The music stopped. Lira lifted her head, confused. Through the shimmering doorway, she saw figures entering. Tall, armored beings with a silver star symbol on their chests. Humans. At their lead was a man, tall with calm gray eyes and a presence that silenced even the proudest nobles. His name was Captain Aaron Holt, commander of the Earth's Peace Fleet. He had come to represent humanity at the celebration. Every Valoran in the hall bowed politely, though their smiles were fake. The High Minister stepped forward. "Captain Holt," he said in his deep voice, "it is an honor to host you. Please join us inside." Holt looked around slowly. "Your palace is magnificent," he said, "but I noticed something outside." The High Minister raised a brow. "Outside? What could possibly interest you there?" Without replying, Holt began walking, not deeper into the hall, but toward the door. Every step echoed across the floor. Whispers filled the air. The nobles exchanged nervous glances. Lira froze when she saw him coming toward her. She stood up quickly, bowing her head. Captain, sir, this area is not—" But Holt didn't stop. He looked at her small, rain-soaked plate, then at the empty tables inside. His jaw tightened. "Why is this table out here?" he asked. A guard behind him answered sharply, "She's of mixed blood, sir. It is tradition." "Tradition?" Holt repeated, his voice flat. He turned his gaze on the High Minister who had followed them out. "You make a girl eat in the cold? Because of her blood?" The minister's tone stayed polite, but his eyes burned. "Every world has its customs, Captain. It is not your place to question ours." The human captain stared at him for a long moment. Then quietly he said, "Then tonight your customs will change." Before anyone could move, he pulled out a chair beside Lira and sat down. Gasps rippled through the air. The guards hesitated, unsure what to do. The nobles inside the hall crowded near the doors, watching in shock as a human, a respected galactic officer, broke the sacred rule of separation. Holt looked at Lira and gave a small smile. May I join you? Lyra's eyes filled with tears. You'll get in trouble, she whispered. He shrugged. Then I'll share the punishment. He reached for the pitcher on her table, poured water into his own glass, and raised it high. To courage, he said softly. The High Minister's face twisted with rage. You are insulting our kind, he shouted. Holt turned toward him unflinching. No, he said calmly. I'm reminding your kind what respect looks like. For a long moment, no one spoke. The rain fell harder, tapping against the marble steps. Lira sat frozen beside him, her heart pounding. Inside the hall, whispers spread like fire. Some nobles called it disgrace, others called it bravery. But everyone knew something had changed tonight, and from that simple act, a human sitting beside an outcast, the seeds of a galactic storm had just been planted. The rain had stopped, but the silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Captain Holt sat beside Lira at the small table, his silver armor shining under the dim lights. Every eye in the banquet hall was fixed on them. Nobody dared to breathe too loud. The most powerful families of the Valoran Empire had just witnessed something unthinkable. A human sharing a meal with one of mixed blood. Lira stared at her plate, her hands shaking. Captain, please, she whispered. You don't understand. If you do this, they already have, he said softly. You're sitting here because they already judged you. He picked up a piece of food from her plate, examined it for a moment, then calmly took a bite. The act was simple, but to the nobles inside, it was rebellion. Gasps filled the air. Some shouted in outrage. Others backed away as if they had seen a ghost. The High Minister, Zorath, stepped forward, his sharp voice echoing. Captain Holt, you are violating Valoran law. Leave that table. Now. Holt stood, tall and unshaken. Law? He asked quietly. Is it law to humiliate a young woman because her father was human? Zorath's eyes flared gold. You dare to lecture me about our customs in my house? I dare, Holt replied, because I've seen what your customs create. Fear, silence, and shame. And I don't stand for it. The guards moved forward, but he raised a hand, stopping them with a glare. His voice turned calm again. Sit down, Lira. She hesitated, but obeyed. The sound of her chair scraping against the stone floor echoed through the empty courtyard. Holt turned toward the crowd of nobles watching from the doorway. Every one of you, he said, his voice firm but steady, claims to be advanced, enlightened. Yet you still judge others by their blood. You talk about unity, but you chain your own people in invisible cages. On Earth, we learned long ago what that leads to. The High Minister laughed bitterly. You humans think you are better? You destroy your own world with wars and greed. Don't speak to us of morality. Holt nodded slowly. Yes, we made mistakes, but we learned. Every scar taught us that no race survives by hate. His gray eyes turned cold. And I won't let yours make the same mistake. Not while I stand here. The rain began again. Soft, slow drops, tapping against the table. Lira felt the air around her change. For the first time in her life, someone was standing up for her. Not because of duty, not because of pity, but because it was right. The nobles began whispering again. Some of them were angry, others uncertain. A few, hidden among them, felt something strange. Guilt. Zorath's voice thundered. You think your words matter here? You are one man, human. You have no authority in this empire. Maybe not, Holt said quietly. But I have something stronger. Truth. And with that he reached for his communicator. A faint blue light glowed from his wrist. He pressed one button, and a soft hum filled the air. Tiny drones, barely visible, floated down from above, recording everything. Zorath froze. What are you doing? Broadcasting, Holt said. To every world in this sector, they deserve to see how you treat your own people. Chaos broke loose. Guards shouted. Nobles panicked, covering their faces. Some ran inside, trying to block the feed, but it was too late. The human fleet's satellites had already picked up the signal. Across the stars, millions of beings were watching, seeing a proud empire that preached honor while shaming a young girl in the rain. Lyra's heart pounded as she looked up at the man beside her. "They'll punish you," she said. "They'll punish both of us." "Then we'll face it together," Holt replied. He looked around at the frightened faces and added, "History always punishes those who hide behind cruelty." The High Minister's voice cracked with fury. "Arrest him!" But the guards hesitated. None dared to move. Everyone knew that harming an ambassador of Earth meant more than scandal. It meant war. For a long moment, the courtyard stood frozen in tension. The rain poured harder. The torches hissed and went out one by one. Finally, Holt spoke again, quieter this time. "You can imprison me, Zorath. You can silence her. But what the galaxy saw tonight will not be forgotten. They will remember who stood for what was right." He turned to Lira and gently placed his cloak over her shoulders. "Come. You've sat in the cold long enough." Together they walked away, the human and the half-blood girl, under the falling rain. No one dared to stop them. Every step they took echoed in the silence of the hall behind them, where nobles watched in shame and confusion. When the great doors finally closed, Zorath's hands shook with rage. "He'll regret this," he whispered. "No human humiliates me and walks free." But deep in his heart, he already knew. Captain Holt's defiance had changed something that could never be undone. That night, every news channel across the galaxy played the same image: a human sitting beside an outcast girl, sharing a meal in the rain. And from that image, a movement began. Quiet at first, but unstoppable. The Empire had built its pride on silence. But one human's defiance had just given the galaxy a voice. By morning, the entire galaxy had seen it. Across hundreds of worlds, glowing screens replayed the same scene again and again: a human captain sitting beside a shunned girl under the rain, refusing to move, refusing to bow. Some called it bravery. Others called it insult. But one truth was clear. Captain Aaron Holt's act had broken a silence older than memory itself. On Valora Prime, the streets were filled with whispers. The rich and powerful cursed his name, but the poor and forgotten spoke it like a prayer. Children who looked different, half-bloods, refugees, workers, stared at the footage in awe. For the first time, they saw someone powerful who didn't turn away. Lira hid inside a small, dim shelter on the city's edge. The rain still fell outside, washing over the empty streets. She sat beside a window, clutching the cloak Holt had given her. It smelled faintly of metal and smoke, the scent of Earth soldiers. It made her feel safe, even as fear wrapped around her heart. Through the thin walls, she could hear the crowd. Protesters had gathered in the square nearby. Some carried banners demanding her arrest. Others shouted for freedom. The sound was chaotic, angry voices mixing with hopeful ones. A small screen on the table flickered to life, showing the news. The anchor, a Valoran woman with sharp eyes, spoke coldly. "Captain Aaron Holt has violated Valoran law and insulted our traditions. The Council of Elders demands his immediate removal and apology from the human fleet. Rumors suggest the half-blood girl is now under human protection. Her name, Lira." Lyra's heart sank. They knew her name now. She looked out the window, and for a moment she thought she saw someone watching her from across the street. A man in a dark cloak. When she blinked, he was gone. The door opened, suddenly, and Captain Holt stepped in, his armor marked with dust and rain. "We have to move," he said quietly. Lira stood quickly. "They're saying you're a criminal," she said. "They're blaming you for everything." He nodded. "I know. The Council has ordered me back to Earth for questioning. They think if I disappear, the noise will fade." "But it won't," she whispered. He smiled faintly. "No, it won't." Outside, the protests grew louder. Angry mobs marched past, throwing stones at human banners. Some shouted her name with hatred, others shouted it with pride. It was no longer about one dinner in the rain. It had become a war of belief. As Holt and Lira slipped through the back alleys, hiding from the crowds, news drones hovered above, recording every move. The footage spread like fire, clips of the pair moving through the storm side by side. On human worlds, people began holding candles, sending messages of support. On Valoran colonies, young workers painted the words "We are one" on the walls, the phrase Holt had spoken before leaving the banquet. But for every act of hope, there came anger. In the council chamber, High Minister Zorath's voice thundered through the hall. "This human has humiliated us before the stars," he shouted. "Our citizens question our purity. We will not stand for this." An advisor spoke cautiously. "The people are divided, Minister. Many sympathize with the girl. Perhaps we—" "Silence." Zorath slammed his fist on the table. "Sympathy is weakness. If they wish to follow her, then they are no longer Valoran." The council nodded in fear. Orders were sent. The military began searching every district. Lira's face appeared on wanted posters glowing across the city walls. "Half-blood traitor, wanted for cultural sabotage." Meanwhile, Captain Holt sat aboard his small shuttle hidden in the shadows of the lower docks. He contacted his ship, the Horizon, orbiting far above. "Captain to command," he said. "The situation on Valora is escalating. I request immediate extraction." The reply came with static. "Negative, Captain. The Council of Worlds has demanded you return for trial. Earth Command is complying to avoid conflict." He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "So they'd rather silence one man than face the truth," he murmured. Lira looked at him with worry. "You saved me. Why are they angry at you for that?" "Because," he said softly, "the moment someone stands up, the ones sitting on their thrones feel afraid." The night outside burned with riots. The city glowed red from fires and blue from electric shields. People shouted her name from rooftops. Some cursed her, some sang it. And across the galaxy, leaders debated what to do about Earth's sudden interference in alien customs. On one moon, a human commander addressed a gathering fleet. "If they touch him," she said coldly, "we respond." And on Valora, in a hidden shelter, Lira whispered, "What happens now?" Captain Holt looked out the window at the rising flames. "Now," he said, "the galaxy decides what kind of world it wants to be." He stood, straightening his uniform, then looked back at her. "Stay here until I return. If I don't, find my crew on the Horizon. Tell them the fight isn't over." Lira grabbed his arm. "You can't face them alone." He smiled, tired but brave. Sometimes one person is enough. When he walked out into the storm, the crowd's noise swallowed him whole. That night, broadcasts across the stars carried one headline: "Human defies galactic law, sparks revolution on Valora Prime." And while the leaders argued, while the soldiers marched, while the Empire shook with anger and fear, one quiet truth spread among the people. A single act of kindness had shattered centuries of silence, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Days passed. Valora Prime no longer slept. The streets burned with lights, chants, and fear. What began as whispers had become a storm. People filled the plazas with banners and shouts, some carrying Holt's image like a hero, others spitting his name like poison. The government blocked human signals, banned Earth channels, and silenced reporters. But the truth had already escaped. Once light touched the stars, it could not be called back. Lira sat inside a small warehouse at the city's edge. Captain Holt had not returned. He had gone to face the council alone, and no one knew what had happened since. The air outside hummed with tension, protesters and soldiers clashing in the streets. The scent of burned metal and smoke drifted through the open cracks in the walls. She couldn't stay hidden anymore. She could feel it, the pull inside her chest. The same courage that made Holt sit beside her in the rain was now alive in her heart. She had spent her life silent, afraid to even look up. But the galaxy, was speaking her name, twisting her story, making her either a symbol or a curse. She decided it was time they heard the truth from her own lips. That evening, as darkness fell over the city, Lira wrapped Holt's cloak around her shoulders and stepped outside. The sky was filled with the flickering blue glow of drones, recording, watching, feeding stories to 100 worlds. She didn't care anymore. She walked toward the central square where thousands had gathered beneath the giant statue of High Minister Zorath. From the shadows, people gasped as they recognized her. The half-blood girl. The one who sat outside. The one who started it all. Is that her? Someone whispered. She's brave to come here, said another. Or foolish, a voice replied darkly. Soldiers stood near the stage, weapons ready. But before they could react, Lira climbed the steps. Her heart pounded like thunder, her legs weak, but she didn't stop. She reached the top, turned toward the endless sea of faces, and took a deep breath. My name is Lira, she began. Her voice trembled, barely heard over the wind. You've all seen what happened that night. You've heard 100 lies about me. But this is the truth. The crowd went silent. Even the soldiers hesitated. I was born between two worlds, she said, her voice growing steadier. My mother was Velaran. My father was human, and because of that I was told I didn't belong anywhere. I was told I was dirty, that I should hide, that my voice didn't matter. Her hands tightened around the cloak. But a stranger sat beside me in the rain and showed me that kindness has no color, no blood, no species. He risked everything just to say that I mattered. A murmur rose in the crowd. Drones zoomed closer, capturing her face. Across the stars, feeds came back online. Her words broke through the government's filters, spreading like a beam of light into darkness. If kindness is a crime, she said, her eyes bright with tears, then maybe we forgot what it means to be alive. The crowd gasped. Some began to clap softly. Others shouted her name. The soldiers looked uncertain. None wanted to be the first to move. On another world, deep in human territory, the broadcast reached the Earth Command Center. Officers and diplomats watched in silence as Lyra's speech echoed across every screen. One of them whispered, "She's speaking for more than just Valora now." Back in the plaza, Lira raised her voice louder. You call yourselves pure. But purity that needs fear to survive is not strength, it's weakness. You say peace is your goal, but peace cannot live beside cruelty. The crowd's energy changed. What had been anger turned into awe. People began to chant her name. Even those who had come to hate her now stood still, unsure of what they felt. Something inside them, something they had buried, began to stir, and then the soldiers moved. A loudspeaker blared, "Disperse immediately! The speech is illegal!" Lira didn't stop. She spread her arms wide, looking at the soldiers and the cameras. "If speaking the truth is illegal," she shouted, "then let them arrest the whole galaxy." The plaza erupted. Thousands of voices shouted back, "No more silence." The soldiers hesitated again. The commander raised his hand to give the order. But suddenly, the giant screen above the square flickered. A new image appeared. Captain Holt, bruised but alive, standing before the Council of Worlds. His voice filled the air. "We are not here to rule you," he said. "We are here to remind you that decency does not belong to one species. Humanity does not demand your obedience, only your conscience." The people screamed and cheered. The soldiers lowered their weapons. The crowd broke into celebration and tears. Lira fell to her knees, overcome with relief. He was alive. He had kept his promise. Drones captured her kneeling under the falling rain, her face lit by the screen above. That single image would later become the symbol of a new age, one where kindness could no longer be silenced. That night, as the crowd spread her message across the galaxy, one truth became clear. The girl who had been forced to eat alone had now given voice to billions. The Empire could no longer pretend not to hear. The stars over Valora Prime burned bright that night, as if watching in silence. Every channel across the galaxy broadcast the same message. The Galactic Council would hold an open hearing to decide the fate of Captain Aaron Holt and the half-human girl Lira. Billions prepared to watch. Some hoped for justice, others wanted punishment. But everyone knew this trial was not just about two lives. It was about what kind of galaxy they would become. The council chamber sat on Orion Station, a colossal structure that floated between worlds like a crown of light. Inside, the great hall curved upward into infinity, filled with floating seats and glowing emblems of 100 civilizations. Reporters swarmed outside. Ships hovered near the glass walls, carrying ambassadors, soldiers, and curious onlookers. When the doors opened, Lira stepped in first. She wore a simple white robe, plain, humble, and clean. Her heart raced. The chamber's cold light reflected in her eyes. Behind her walked Captain Holt, calm but visibly weary. His armor was scratched, his face marked by exhaustion. Yet when the crowd hissed and whispered, he didn't flinch. The High Minister Zorath sat across from them, his expression sharp as a blade. He had come not as a defendant, but as an accuser. His horns gleamed in the light. "This hearing," he announced proudly, "is to decide whether humanity's interference violated the ancient code of non-intervention." He smiled coldly, his gaze fixed on Holt. "You dishonored Velaran law, Captain. You humiliated our people before the galaxy. You will answer for your crimes." Holt stood straight. "If kindness is a crime," he said quietly, "then I plead guilty." A wave of murmurs swept through the chamber. The council speaker, an ancient being of pure light, raised his hand. "Let us hear from the witnesses," he said. "The girl first." Lira froze. The hall felt enormous, endless. The sight of hundreds of alien eyes on her made her chest tighten. But then she remembered Holt sitting beside her in the rain, sharing food without fear. That memory gave her strength. She stepped forward. "I never asked him to save me," she said softly. "He saw something wrong and chose to act. He didn't care what I was, only that I was treated unfairly." Zorath interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. "You forget, girl, you are the one who caused all this chaos. Your very existence is proof of what you fear most," Lira said suddenly, her voice louder now. "That love can exist between different worlds." The crowd gasped. Even the council speaker leaned forward, intrigued. She continued, her voice trembling but clear. "I was born into hate. I was told I was unworthy, dirty, less than others. But I have seen more humanity in one man's act of kindness than in all your golden halls." Zorath rose, slamming his fist. "Enough! This is manipulation. She was trained by humans to play the victim." Holt turned toward him, his tone calm but cutting. "You call her words manipulation because they make you see the truth. You built your power by dividing others. But fear cannot rule forever." The council speaker raised his hand again. Silence. The room fell still. "Let us view the record." The giant screen above flickered. The footage played. The banquet, the rain, the moment Holt sat beside Lira. The room filled with the faint sound of falling rain and quiet defiance. When the image froze, the chamber stayed utterly silent. A counselor from the human delegation spoke softly. "Sometimes," he said, "justice begins with one seat beside the outcast." The speaker looked around the room. "You have seen the act. You have heard the words. Now decide." The verdict light flickered through the council rows, green for mercy, red for guilt. One by one, the orbs glowed green. When the final light shone, the speaker spoke the words that shook the galaxy. "Captain Aaron Holt and Lira are found innocent of all charges. Their actions are declared moral under the Charter of Sentient Rights." Gasps echoed. Cheers erupted from parts of the hall. On distant planets, crowds cheered in the streets. Children painted stars on walls. Half-bloods cried tears of hope. The story had spread farther than anyone could stop, but not everyone celebrated. Zorath stood in silence, trembling with rage. "You fools," he hissed. "You've doomed us all. You think you've won? The purity of Velora will never bow to..." Human weakness. He turned and stormed out, his cloak flaring behind him like a dark wing. Guards followed, unsure whether to protect him or the world from him. Lira looked toward Holt, her eyes full of emotion. "It's over," she whispered. He shook his head slightly. "No," he said quietly. "It's only beginning. Men like Zorath don't accept defeat. They strike back harder," she swallowed. "Then we'll stand again." He smiled faintly. "Now you sound like a human." As they walked out of the chamber, the doors opened to a sea of cameras, lights, and chants. The people's voices thundered, in unison, "We are one! We are one!" And for the first time in history, the galaxy's oldest law, the law of separation, began to crumble. But far away in the deep chambers of Valora, Zorath was already gathering his generals. His eyes burned with fury. "If they want a new world," he whispered, "they will bleed for it." The storm was far from over. The halls of the Valoran capital shook with rage. High Minister Zorath stood before his council, his sharp horns gleaming under the red light of the chamber. Around him sat his generals, silent and tense. The trial was over. The galaxy had sided with the humans. His power, his pride, his centuries-old rule, all of it was slipping away. "They made fools of us," he roared, slamming his fist onto the marble table. Cracks spread across its surface. "That human humiliated our race before billions." The council bowed to earth like frightened children. One of the generals spoke carefully. "Minister, the people are divided. The lower cities celebrate the verdict. They cheer for the human and the girl. If we act now, we risk rebellion." "Rebellion?" Zorath hissed. "Then let them rebel. We'll remind them who rules Valora." He turned toward the glowing map on the wall. "Prepare the fleet. If humanity wishes to teach us about morality, then we will teach them fear." The room went cold. Everyone understood what that meant. War. In orbit above Valora Prime, the human ship Horizon floated quietly among the stars. Captain Holt stood near the main window, his reflection blending with the lights of distant worlds. He had heard the rumors. Zorath had rejected the Council's ruling. Valora's fleets were moving again, gathering near the border of human space. "Commander," said his communications officer, "Valoran ships are arming. Over 200 vessels forming near the Shadow Sector." Holt's jaw tightened. "Any word from Earth Command?" "Only silence, sir. They're trying to negotiate." He sighed. Negotiation won't stop pride. Behind him, footsteps approached. Lira entered the bridge wearing a new diplomatic uniform, white with the insignia of the Galactic Alliance. "They said you'd be here," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "You know me too well." "I heard about the fleet," she said. "They're really going to attack?" He nodded slowly. "Pride is louder than reason." Lira walked closer, looking out at the stars. "Maybe pride is all they have left. Then it's time to take it from them," Holt said quietly. He turned to his crew. "Send a signal to all nearby vessels. Activate defense formation, but do not fire. I want every ship visible, every human emblem glowing bright. We won't start this war, but if they move first, we'll finish it." The command spread through space. Soon, the stars themselves seemed to come alive. Dozens, then hundreds of human ships appeared, sleek, silver, and silent. They aligned across the darkness like a wall of light. The galaxy watched again, holding its breath. In the Valoran war chamber, Zorath's advisors watched the human fleet appear on their screens. The sight was terrifying, a vast line of ships stretching farther than their sensors could measure. "Minister," said a young officer, his voice trembling, "they are not firing. They're just watching us," Zorath snarled. "They think they can frighten me with their silence. I'll wipe them from the stars." But then another voice came from behind him, older, quieter. "Minister," said General Varys, "look closely. They came ready to defend, not destroy. They could have attacked already, but they haven't. They're waiting. They're giving us a chance to step back." "Cowards," Zorath spat. "No," Varys said slowly. "They're showing restraint, something we've forgotten." The minister's hand shook. Rage burned in his chest. How dare a human show mercy to Valorans? How dare they make him look weak? But deep inside, even he felt it. The weight of fear, the weight of being wrong. On the horizon, Holt stood at the command platform, his voice calm. Keep shields raised. No aggression. The world must see who starts this. Lira watched beside him, nervous. What if they fire? He looked at her. Then history will remember who did. The tension stretched for hours. Across the galaxy, reporters whispered. Leaders waited and children prayed. Two mighty fleets faced each other in silence, pride against conscience. Finally, a flash appeared on the Valoran side, a single ship breaking formation. The officer watching whispered, It's the flagship. Minister Zorath's vessel. On board that ship, Zorath's hands hovered over the launch command. His reflection stared back at him, old, proud, afraid. For the first time, he saw what the galaxy saw, a tyrant too stubborn to change. He slammed his fist down, but not on the control, on the console beside it. Sparks flew. Stand down, he ordered quietly. The officers froze, shocked. Stand. Down, he repeated louder. Across the fleet, weapons powered down one by one. The stars grew calm again. The next day, Zorath disappeared. Some said he fled into exile. Others believed his own people removed him. It didn't matter. The age of his rule was over. When the message reached Holt, he simply nodded. Pride always falls the same way, he said softly. Loud at first, then silent forever. Lira smiled faintly. You didn't even fire a single shot. He looked out at the stars. Sometimes strength isn't about how loud you fight. It's about how long you stand, the galaxy agreed. Songs were written, monuments built, and for the first time in generations, humans and Valorans spoke as equals. The war that never began became the peace that would never end. Morning light spread across the galaxy like a quiet promise. The war that almost began had ended before a single shot was fired. The human fleet drifted peacefully over Valora Prime, its silver hulls reflecting the pale glow of dawn. Below, the streets were silent, not with fear this time, but with awe. The empire that once ruled through pride and division had fallen. In the weeks that followed, things began to change. The banners of the old regime were taken down. The statues of High Minister Zorath were removed, replaced with simple symbols of unity, a human hand and a Valoran one, reaching toward each other. The streets once filled with soldiers, now filled with children, playing together under banners of peace. At the center of the capital, in the square where Lira had once given her speech, crowds gathered again, not to shout but to celebrate. Music from both worlds filled the air, strange yet beautiful when mixed together. For the first time in living memory, humans walked freely on Valora soil, and Valorans smiled back. Lira stood at the edge of the square, her eyes full of emotion. She wore a simple silver necklace and a gift from the people. It was shaped like a tear and a star, joined together, symbolizing pain and hope. Around her, cameras floated, recording her every word. The past cannot be erased, she said softly, speaking to billions, but it can teach us how to walk forward. I once believed I had no place in this galaxy. But I learned something powerful, that belonging is not given by blood or name. It's earned by heart. The crowd cheered, the sound echoing across the city. Children waved small flags, humans and Valorans side by side. Her words would travel across systems and become a new pledge for peace. When the ceremony ended, Lira stepped away from the cameras and into the quiet garden behind the hall. A soft wind brushed through the glowing trees, carrying the scent of flowers and rain. She closed her eyes for a moment, remembering the cold night of the banquet, the shame, the rain, the human who had simply sat beside her. Footsteps approached. She turned, and there he was. Captain Aaron Holt looked older now. His hair had silver threads, his eyes softer. He no longer wore armor. His uniform had been replaced with a simple gray jacket worn at the edges. Yet when he smiled, he looked the same, calm, strong, and human. You disappeared, she said with a small laugh. Again. I never liked crowds, he replied. Besides, you didn't need me anymore. She walked closer. That's not true. None of this would have happened without you. He shook his head. No, I only lit a spark. You carried the fire. They walked together through the garden. Birds with crystal wings fluttered overhead, and the sound of distant laughter echoed from the plaza. For the first time in her life, Lira felt peace. Not the kind that comes from silence, but from being seen. Are you staying? She asked quietly. Holt stopped beside a tree with silver leaves. No, he said. I'm retiring. The fleet doesn't need me now. There's another world that does. Another world? He smiled faintly. A small moon on the edge of the Nebaran belt. It's quiet. I might plant something there. She tilted her head. Plant something? He looked at her with that same soft gaze he had the night he defied the Empire. Trees, peace doesn't grow unless someone tends it. Lira laughed quietly. You're going to be a farmer? Maybe that's what humanity needs most now, he said. Less soldiers. More gardeners. They stood in silence for a while, watching the sunlight break through the clouds. Then she said, If you ever need help planting those trees, call me. He smiled. I'll hold you to that. When they parted, he placed a small metal insignia in her hand, the emblem of the Earth Fleet. Keep this, he said. A reminder that one act of courage can change more than 1,000 laws. She looked down at it, her reflection shining in the metal. I won't forget. He walked away slowly, disappearing down the path lined with glowing flowers. The sound of his footsteps faded, leaving only the wind. Lira stood alone in the garden, holding the insignia close to her heart. She looked up at the twin suns rising together in the sky, two lights once separate, now shining side by side, far away, in the outer rim. Captain Holt stepped onto the soil of his new home, a quiet moon bathed in golden light. He knelt, pressed a small seed into the earth, and whispered, For her, for them, for us all. The wind carried his words across the stars, across the worlds that had watched hate turn to hope. And on Valora Prime, flowers began to bloom where the old banners once hung. The galaxy had found its balance again. The girl once forced to eat alone had become the voice of unity. The human once defied for kindness had become the symbol of peace. And together, though far apart, they had changed the meaning of being human, forever.